once we get started, can you just grab a couple of them for me? You know where they are, right?
Okay. We are live. And I will be...
Yeah, we're live, and I'm going to grab some brushes for Kevin while he gets us started.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome back, everybody. We will be doing the raffle a little bit later for the painting, but I want to jump in. I want to get started. The painting's been sealed. I did a little bit of touching up on it along the way. This was flattened out, so I just put a couple of highlights back into it just to round it out. But basically, this is the sealed painting. Now I'm just going to start layering in color and colored glaze on top. So for me, I work through it. I like to work from pinks into reds and then greens and then blues. And so I'm going to stay away from the warm colors for the most part. The painting is already quite warm, so I want to stick with cooler colors. And I am going to start again with the most delicate of the colors that I'm going to be working with, which is a pink. Thank you. And so this, you can see it, I thin it down. And again, I don't want more than 50% of the mixture to be oil. So like they say, 50% paint, 50% oil is the lowest amount of paint you should have in a glaze. And then it's just a matter of like how heavily you put it on, and do you knock it down after you've, do you lift it after you put it on? So not a great deal of oil in this. This particular color does not require a lot of oil. It's really transparent on its own. Right. So now bear in mind that there are already lots of reds in the painting. And so I don't need to put really red paint down. I'm just looking to add a few accents. And again, you'll see like this is very thick and colorful. When I pull it out here, it barely has any body to it. Barely does anything. It's almost grayed down by the palette paper. And this is what I want to work with. And I was looking around the painting for places where there is clearly more pink than what I have. And I'm just going to lay the paint down. I'm not going to blend it. I know we're going to have really kind of along this edge and then down into the bulb of the nose. There's a lot of red in the shadows here, and so I'm just going to pull this down, not in the shadow here, but in the shadow on the nose itself. And so I'm just going to pull this down and let it cover that. And again, I'm not worried about this edge down here. I'm just going to let it fade. I'm also seeing quite a nice amount of red right on this edge. Like that. Seeing a little bit down in here. This is really going to elevate. You're going to see, like, even with it without being blended, it's going to have a nice impact on the painting. And like I said, this is a cool pink. The oil is going to warm it a little bit. The linseed oil is a little bit yellow, and so that does have an impact. And again, I'm just taking my time. You see, I'm not putting down a lot of paint. Small amounts of paint. See a little bit more red in the shadow up in here, and really kind of down in here. So again, inside of the shadow doesn't have nearly as much of an impact as it does in the light. But I will get some of that red in there. And again, this is all going to get knocked down as I go. It's not going to stay this way. Again, on the cheek, right here, it kind of plays that edge almost pretty much the whole way down. Not there. A lot of bone structure in here exposed. So this is all soft tissue. This is bone structure. It's not going to be quite as pink up here. Definitely in the lips. And again, it's not going to stay this colorful. I am going to knock this down and wipe stuff out. I want to be careful not to overdo it. I'm trying to see only the places that really jump out to me as having that extra hit of color. Things that really feel more colorful to me. A little bit of in here. And then of course we're going to move into this eye. And a little bit of pink up in here. And again, I'm going to take a soft brush to this later on, and I'm going to knock some of this down, lift some of it. Seeing it on this edge here, and even in here. Right, it's out in here, not in here, but it is over here. Kind of like that. Again, I'll be building this up, like if I can put this color down and then I can work something on top of it to help neutralize it if I find it's too colorful. Just a hit of red in here. I want to be careful not to just be putting dots here and there, but I'm thinking about what it's describing. I'm trying to keep this stuff as connected as possible. Not everything is going to be connected to everything else, but I'll try to keep it connected as much as possible. So that one thing blends into another, so I don't wind up with this kind of dotted face.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about becoming a makeup artist?
No. I like painting, you know. And I got to tell you, like, I have two daughters, and I've tried to like paint their nails. I have no skills on that end. That is a skill set all of its own. So no, I'm not going down that road outside of my skill set and my comfort zone.
That was Peggy asking, and she has a really good question along with that, though.
Okay.
How do you adjust the color temperature in the glazing stage?
Well, I mean, there are warm and cool colors. If I put a cool color down, it's going to be relatively cool in the painting. And if I put a warm color down, it's going to be relatively warm. Bear in mind, the oil that I'm using is warm by nature. The linseed oil, it kind of yellows. And so I've got to take that into account as well. So right now I'm working with just cool colors. I'm going to stay away from the warm colors as much as possible because this is already warm. It doesn't require any more warmth. At least I don't think it does. I may change my mind about that as I go, but at the moment, once I start putting warm colors down, I'm not going to be able to back away from them. And so I'd rather just keep it cool to start, and then I'll find places later on that might require some warmth.
Another question to go with that.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the pink considered to be a cool color?
So it's always relative. Relative to everything else that I'd be putting that's down here, it is cool. These colors that are down already are neutral to warm, and so this pink compared to them is cool. Right? There's no such thing as a cool color. It's only how it relates to the other colors. Right? And so I'm just looking at it and I'm saying, well, it's compared to the other colors that are down, it is relatively cool. All right, and so with that in place, like for me, I'm not going to blend it out yet. I'm going to be aggressive about my blending a little bit later. And I do want to move through this. I kind of wet the painting a little bit, very, very thin passive oil just before I started, like just before you guys jumped in. And so I do want to make sure that everything gets covered and everything is blended out before it starts to set up. And again, I will know immediately when it starts to get sticky. I'll feel it, and so I'll deal with all of this stuff at that time. And even now, I'm going to knock some edges down. I'll go back in with a dry brush and I'll wipe stuff out. Because I don't want everything to be the same. I don't want like this pink to be equal everywhere. I want it to be stronger in some places and weaker in others. And so I'm going to have to go in and manage that because it's coming off the brush pretty equal, right? I don't have different densities of paint here. So it comes off the brush and it's pretty equal. Everything is the same amount of pink going down. So once I get everything in place, I can then decide what do I want to leave and what do I want to thin out.
And I'll just add in here, this is really where you see Kevin's confidence coming through. Speaking from someone who's done a bit of glazing, Kevin pushing this painting this far so fast is really, really awesome to see.
Yeah, I mean, I've done paintings, Daniel can tell you, where I just threw paint on here and then pushed it around like it looked like stained glass. And then I kind of push the paint around until it yields what I want. And again, if I don't like it, I can just take a rag to it and take it off, which, you know, helps. It's easy to be confident when you have a foolproof eraser. And you'll see, I'll probably wipe some of this out with a rag, just as I go, because there's a lot of pink on here right now. But it's easier for me to make sense of it with it all being overly pink. Easier for me to deal with it, to see it for what it is with all this pink in place, and kind of go in and neutralize what I don't need. So again, so this is just going to even everything out a little bit.
Question: how big of a dry brush do you use?
You'll see as I go. I'm not going to be working with a big brush. I'm not going to take like a giant fan brush and blend with that. It's ineffective. Probably a brush one size bigger than this, not much. But a lot of the work is going to be done with a rag. I just lift what I don't want, right? So now that I have that in place, and I want to make sure I'm getting something that's lint-free. I don't want to work on my edges. So here I'm just going to, I like to fold this into a wedge. And I'm just going to go in and kind of lift some of what I don't want. And then once I've got that done, then I'll just go back in and blend out what is here.
Question?
Yes.
How many layers of the glaze will be applied to this painting?
Just the one. You can do many. You can do as many as you want. The problem with glazing, though, is that every layer makes the painting darker. And it gets the first layer might only make a 1 value shift, but the second layer could be 2 values. The third layer could be 3 total values. And so you do 1 glaze, it knocks it back 1 value. You do 2, it knocks it back 3 values. You do 3, it knocks it back 6 values. And all of a sudden your painting will start to plug up and become very, very dark. And at that point, the only way to repair it is to actually go back in and repaint everything from scratch as an opaque. And you don't want to do that. So you have to be very careful not to overshoot the mark or to be able to take the paint off if it's not doing what you want it to do. But again, like multiple passes of glaze, they can be wonderful, but you have to know what you're doing. You have to be able to manage them as you go. You have to plan in the initial stages for how many passes of glaze you plan to put on your painting so that you can lighten up the painting enough in its earlier stages to account for the levels of darkness that are going to be created by the glazes you put on top. Right? And so if you know that you're going to wind up with 3 levels of glaze, you might have to make the painting 4 values lighter than what you plan in the places the glazes are going to go. Right? And that's a lot of calculating at the beginning of a painting that you haven't actually done anything with. It's just an idea, right? So your first pass, when you lay it down, making such drastic changes to the value structure so early that it's a challenge. And obviously, I mean, it can be done, but you have to, so for me, I recommend, like if you're learning how to glaze, 1 layer of glaze. Like learn how to do 1. And then what will happen is you'll find that, well, in some places in your painting, a second pass would have been nice. So then you get into the habit of doing a second pass in a few places. Once you get settled into that, you can then expand out to a 3rd pass in certain places, and then a 4th and a 5th, and eventually you get to a point where you're very comfortable with glazing. But I would always try to get the opaque aspects of the painting to to as close to the finished values as you're looking for, so that you're not depending on the glaze to do the heavy lifting for you, right? The glaze is not meant to do heavy lifting. It's meant to, at least the way that I use it, it's not meant to get you the right values, and it's not meant to get you the right colors. It's meant to tweak what is already very, very close to the intended goal. If you depend on glazing to do all of the work for you, like you do a lousy pass on your painting to start, figuring that you'll just correct it with glaze, you'll wind up with a mess on your hands every time. Glaze it's a beautiful technique, and it lends to a painting in a way that no other technique does, but it is so easy. It is so easy to ruin a painting with glazes if you are asking too much of the pass, right? And that's something you learn as you do it. You know, you ruin a painting, you're like, okay, well, that was too much. And like I said, but at that point, then what do? You wipe it off. I can take a rag and I can wipe off everything that I've just put down if I don't like it. Right? And so there. Got lots of nice pink in there now. And you want to be careful not to let any like dust or anything and pieces of paper towel or anything settle in the paint. So I think that looks pretty good. From here, I'm going to move down. I'm looking for like magentas and purples and things like that. And so I'm looking for places where I might need to darken a value. Like I feel like the mouth needs to be darker in here. Even the lip over here needs to be darker. And so I can work into this color. And again, not every color that goes down is going to necessarily be the same color. Like the lips are pink, but that doesn't mean that I have to put more pink on top. Pink on top of pink can be a little bit much. And so I want to knock the value down. It's light over here. I don't want it as light over here because it's turning around the form. So this color, there's some purple in it, but it's actually mostly brown. And so I can drop this in, and again, I'm going to knock this down a little bit, but it's going to allow me to make the lip look like it's rolling around. This side is in the light, this side is rolling out of the light, just like the face. I'm going to look around to see before I kind of throw that away, if there's any place else I can do that. I can see it in the eye here. I'll probably get a little bit of it in here. Down in here as well. This is going to be a little bit less paint, but same coloration. Again, I'm going to blend all of this later on. I can even grab in here just a little bit of a pinch, and I would even move up into the eyebrow. And again, I'm trying not to have 1,000 colors. Also, I'm trying to find places where the pink will work for everything. This color will hold the place of a lot of different things. Again, because the glaze is allowing what's underneath to show through, it's not just the color of the glaze, but a combination of the color of the glaze and what's already down. And so I have a little bit of flexibility. I can put this color down, and if it goes on red, it looks one way. If it goes on green, it looks another way. And so I'm trying to take advantage of that as I'm going here. So I can put in that fold on the eye. Put this under here. And this is, it's not very dark, and it's transparent, so it doesn't look like black lines on her face. And that's good. I want something that it's going to look very natural. And I'm just looking, again, I'm looking for places where this color value works to explain something that's going on. And again, I'm going to knock this down like I did with the other, with the red that I put down, or the pink. So I drop this down in here. All right, and you can see I'm getting some contrast out of this.
Question for you, Kevin.
Yes.
So Sue is a student in Evolve. She's in block 6, and she painted this girl, Carly, in grayscale. And she's wondering if she could seal it and use glazing to add colors to it. And if so, would she do it differently from how you're doing it now?
Well, the answer is yes, you can do that. It's working over a grayscale is not so simple, right? I'm using transparent colors because everything that's here is in color. If you work over a grayscale, your glazes have to be, they actually have to be thinned down, like semi-opaques, in order to have any density, right? Because, like I said, everything that I'm putting down right now shows the color of the canvas, or what's down already, through it. And so I don't have to make something very red, but if this were gray and it was showing through, everything would look gray when I was finished. This is not, what I'm doing is not a traditional approach to glazing. It's a little bit different. Traditional glazing, the paints are a lot heavier and there's a lot of wiping out. So actually, in answer to your question, I would say I wouldn't go and do that to your grayscale painting. I would leave the grayscale painting alone. As you get, what block is she in?
She's in block 6.
Yeah, so you'll be able to kind of play with your glazing in block 6, just not on this image, you know, because this image is not in block 6. But, I mean, it's basically the same thing. If you can do it for one image, you can do it for any image. You see, like sometimes, like, you know, you ask a question, and I think, like, initially, like, my mind is really on what I'm doing here. So initially, I'll think one thing, and I have to kind of back away from it. But yeah, you won't be able to you won't be able to use this technique the way I'm doing it on top of a grayscale painting. And I'm just trying to get a little bit more contrast in here while I'm working with this darker value. Just trying to get a little bit more contrast. Pull the chin forward.
Yeah, it's cool to see the features of her face. You're starting to push forward and back using that contrast. Basically, you're just pushing things back, which is by default making the things that are in the light push forward.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to soften these things. They're not going to stay the way they are. I like this soft shadow, so I don't want to overwrite too much of it, but I do need to accent it a little bit in some places in order to get the contrast ratios that I want. And again, there's other colors that will probably go in here as well. And once I've got this paint in place, I'll just move it around. I'll kind of scrub down the edges. And again, this is the brush that has the paint on it. I'll eventually go to a brush that has no paint on it. And I'm not just pushing it around. It's being done thoughtfully. I don't want to just wipe out or obscure. I put the marks down very carefully. I know where I put them, and I know why I put them, where they went. And I want to make sure that I'm not ruining the work that I did. Like all of these marks explain something. They explain form. They explain something. And if I push the paint around too much without care, I'll lose what I was trying to define with these marks. And again, I may have to go in and wipe some of this out, just like I did with the last pass. Again, some of these shapes, I'm just grouping them together. The eyebrow, this, the fold, all being grouped together. Not everything needs to be treated as a separate thing. Some of these things, they work better if they're just clustered together and treated as a single shape. Like even in here, coming into this eye. Helping to bring it in line value-wise. Same over here. I'll be going to a different color at some point, but just from a value standpoint, it's easier to see it like this.
Question?
Yes.
Is there a specific color theory reason why you like to glaze from reds to greens to blues?
You know what? I find that the reds are the easiest to overdo. This stuff can get away from you as you work. And so for me, I like to start with red because it's easy to take out if it's the only thing down. If I decide I don't like it, very easy to remove. And so as I was learning how to glaze, I found that red was the one I was usually overdoing, And since I found myself wiping it out often enough as I was learning, easiest to just do it first. Also, like blues tend to dry very fast. They set up and dry very quickly. And so, at least that's what I found. And so for me, I don't want something setting up very fast because it takes away my flexibility. If I have to deal with it very quickly, and I put it down first, I can get 2 values in, it can start to get sticky. I'd rather do the stuff that stays wet longer and then put the blues and the grays down towards the end of the process, just because it gives me more time to work, more time to play around. Right, nothing worse than working on something like this and realizing that the paint is starting to dry and you are running out of time. You have to now rush to get done, right? Because the moment you start going down there, you're sacrificing quality for speed. And it happens if you're not, if you're not practiced. And just to kind of frame this, you can only practice glazing on a painting that's already been done, right? So you have to make a painting and then glaze it. And so it's hard to practice because you have to make paintings in order to practice it. You have to get a painting almost done and then apply the technique. And so, where like doing the initial pass before I get to the glazing, I can do that and that's my practice. But I have to get the painting to where it was today in order to then practice this and see it in a finished way. And so it's because of that, it's not easy to practice. And you do put the painting at risk. Like, the painting has to be sealed before I can do this, because the painting itself can actually get stained. If it's not sealed, like a red glaze will stain the actual paint, the paint that's down, that's dry. And so here I'm just lifting some of the highlights off this lip. Again, I'm kind of dabbing this and I'm lifting some of the highlights that I want. I'm kind of pushing in a little bit aggressively. Pull those highlights back out. And so it's actually coming along quite nicely. I've got my pinks, and I've now got those contrasts in. Contrasts are looking pretty good. And so from here, I've now got to make a decision, like blues or greens. And to be honest, I'm not seeing a lot in here. There are a few greens. I'm seeing green out here, seeing a little bit in here. Not very much. So grab a little bit of that. And I don't want to put just green. I'm actually going to grab a little bit. I'll grab a little magenta and add it in as well. The green will be a little bit too strong. I need to get it closer to the flesh tone, right? Because in here, it doesn't look like green. It just looks less pink. And so I'm going to create something that's a mixture. Most of these colors, they're not going to go down straight out of the tube. They're going to require a little manipulation. And so this, just a little bit of green, and I'm going to have to knock that down. I'm actually okay with what's in there. It's a little bit up in here. Right. I've decided to go with green rather than blue. I'm really not seeing a lot of blue in here. There are a couple of little places, but it's mostly green that I'm seeing. And again, with this, just kind of married into what's here. When you're first starting out, if you want, you can actually do, so like you can put your reds down and let the painting dry, or do like reds and magentas and purples and let it dry, and then do another pass of greens and blues. That might make it a little bit easier to manage, so that you're not contaminating one color with another any more than you intend. But it's like, again, there's really not much to be done in here. I'm gonna grab a little bit of blue. I mean, the face is mostly good to go at this point. I'm seeing a little bit of blue down in here, a little bit in here. And again, this is just lots of turns in the form here, so it kind of grays out, even in here. And again, I'll obviously knock that stuff down. And again, just a little bit of blue, not a lot. And again, this is going to get knocked down. It's not going to stay the way that it is.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Should we be practicing on a painting by thinking of it as practice, or work to do it more as a finished work?
Always as a finished work, right? So it's like, you know, anybody who's ever done a sport, you know, if you compete in a sport, you don't do your exercises, your jumping jacks, with the same vigor that you do the actual sport that you compete in. Right? It's just the nature of it. We just don't commit the same level of energy to the exercises. The things that we use to warm up for our sport don't get the same respect as the sport itself. And so if you think of this stuff as merely exercises, you will deliver exercise grade results. Very, very hard to get past that, because I think it's human nature. We save our A game for the game. Right, and so, like, you think about it, and you know, some people will be like, well, I don't do that. But if I gave you, imagine if I gave you a professional commission. Do you think the professional commission, like right now, if I just gave one to you, that you would paint it at the same level as your last painting? Or do you think you would up your game? Right, and I would say that, you know, the vast majority of you would be like, well, yeah, I mean, I would definitely up my game from the last piece. And that's the difference between the exercise and doing it for real, right? If I gave you a professional commission, everything you have would be thrown into it. Well, why don't you do that already with your exercises? Well, because they're exercises. Now, you may think you're giving everything, and then somehow you get extra for the professional job, the first job you get, right? But the truth is, if you can generate the extra, that's actually where you belong. You're just doing less than that for your exercises. And so you just want to, like, to me, nothing is treated as an exercise. Everything is treated like it's a professional job. And I do that in here. Like, I'll talk to students that are trying to get to the point where they're doing professional level work. And it's like, well, imagine if this painting is the one that's going to go up in a museum and the world is going to see it. Like, deliver that quality. What do you want to be remembered for? This painting is going to be the one that the world knows you by. What does this painting have to be in order for you to be proud of the fact that this is what you are known for? And so, like, that kind of thinking changes what you deliver. So if you think of it as an exercise, you are going to deliver exercise grade work. It's just human nature. And again, I'm just kind of going around looking for places where a little bit of this, or I think it'll make a difference. And I can feel it starting to get a little bit sticky. So I don't have a lot of time left before I have to move on from this and like get this done and move on to the next portion of the painting, which I haven't oiled out. Somebody asked about oiling out last time, I think. And you can actually oil out with liquid, but you do have to be thoughtful about it. Does dry. It does get sticky and it does dry, and so you want to make sure that you're leaving yourself enough time Like I wouldn't do just liquid. I would do a mixture of, I was saying liquid, of alkyd medium and linseed oil. I like a 1 to 5, 1 alkyd to 5 parts linseed oil. I find that dries overnight, but at the same time also gives you about 3 hours of working time, which to me is, like for glazing, is optimum. You'll be long done. You'll be long done with whatever glazing you're doing in that window of time. You should be anyway. Anyway, so I'm going to actually stop there with that. I'm going to go in, I'm going to drop in the eyes and then move on. And I can also, at this point, I can drop in additional highlights. The highlights are not as bright as they could be, so I can go in and I can drop in highlights as well. Those will have to be done with opaques. And you can see I've actually got my original values for my brightest highlight to my darkest shadow that went down in the original passes. And so I can go in and I can clean up with that. I can bring some of these values back into place. I can bring up some highlights or whatever else I want to do. Again, I do want to make sure everything is smooth. Unless I intentionally want texture on a face this young, there's just no reason for texture. I mean, her skin is very smooth, a little bit in here, but no reason to put it in. So, so this is a mixture. I was just playing with this earlier. I've got a little bit of black paint, which is opaque. Put a little bit of, I'm looking at my darkest shades, this little bit of this purple, tiny little bit of blue. I don't need a lot. The black makes it more opaque, but black by itself is going to be kind of lifeless, and so I do want other colors in it. So I don't want it to just read as black. So this has a little bit of color, but it's kind of nondescript. And so in here, I can now go in and I can render and again, very, very small brush and very small marks. All right, you'll see, the eye will just come to life when I drop these darks in.
Hey, question. Got a student here in Block 3 asking a little bit about glazing, and she's asking, how is Kevin blending these newly added colors so smoothly with the underneath paint? Kevin, can you kind of describe how, even though these, like this paint that you're putting down now is not technically mixing in with the paint underneath it, the dry paint, but how our eyes are perceiving it to be mixing together?
Well, the paint that's already down, that was down when we started today, is completely dry. What I'm putting down right now is actually sitting on the surface. It's almost like a color. In fact, it is exactly like a colorized photograph. It's just all I'm doing is colorizing the image, or in this case, just augmenting the colors that are down. That's basically it. These are not mixing with what's already down. These colors, these shifts are all sitting on the surface of the painting. So that's basically how it works.
From a scientific standpoint, it's like the light is going through the transparent paint?
Yeah, so basically what this is a suspension. You have a layer, imagine if we looked at it in cross-section, a layer of oil with little dots of pigment floating around in it. The light goes through that, bounces off the opaque painting and then is bounced back out. So the glaze, what I'm putting down now, because it's see-through, is lit from behind by the light bouncing off the opaque painting that was done last week. That's all that is. But again, it's a simple description, but there's a lot to that. And it affects how you see this, right? This glaze is actually being lit from behind. It's like a backlit television. Right, but for now, all you need to know is that, like, just watch what we're doing. We're going to talk about this, right? Unless you're already at this stage in what you're doing, none of this conversation is going to have any value, and the vast majority of people watching this will have no idea what we're talking about if we go there. So I'd rather stay away from that conversation. If you're in Evolve and you're learning this stuff, you'll actually learn it when you watch the videos, because I talk about it. And all I'm trying to do is just make sure that the eye has a good feel to it. And again, if I have to, I could always go back in and rework the eye as a separate pass, just render a detail, nostrils, edges of the mouth. I'm not going to. This painting will be done however it ends today is where the painting will be as a final painting. But I am trying to make sure that it has a nice kind of finish to it. And again, I'm thinking about my edges as I go. I'm thinking about values. I'm thinking about colors, and I'm thinking about edges the whole way through the process. A little bit on this edge. All right, and this is delicate work, like as I'm doing this here. This is delicate work because the paint lifts very easily. It's liquid. So, and I'm not rotating the painting, which I normally do to give me a better angle to work, which is a little bit challenging to just work in one direction. Normally I'd rotate the painting in order to be able to access the best angle to work. Okay, move on to the other eye.
Question.
Yes.
Are the eyes typically the sharpest painted feature in a portrait?
No, not necessarily. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense that you wouldn't have something sharper than the eyes, but they don't have to be sharper than everything else, right? You know, your area of focus is where you're going to put your sharpest edges, your greatest contrast, you know, things like that. And so, I mean, in this case, like, I wouldn't have like the ear as sharp as the eye. I wouldn't bring up the contrast of the ear to compete with the eye. But the eye can have equals within the painting. The mouth can be just as sharp as the eye, so can the nose. It depends what it is that you're looking for. You know, all of these things are about like what you want out of your painting, right? It's not a this is the rule and you have to follow it. It's like, what are you looking for in your painting? What are you trying to tell people when they view your work? Where do you want the attention, right? And so, like, I'm putting a contrast in the eyebrow because it pulls the brow forward, sets the eye back a little bit, right? I'm making these decisions along the way as I go, trying to get an effect, right? For me, what I'm trying to do is create create a strong impression of 3 dimensions. And so that's where my energy is being spent. I'm not worrying about the eyes being sharper than something else, or, right? It's, that might actually wind up being what happens, but it's not where my focus is. I'm not really thinking in those terms. The eyes just, in reality, just happen to have a greater contrast than everything else, because they're the only thing in the image that I could make the argument is black. Everything else is a little bit lighter. And so it's going to jump in a way that other stuff doesn't. Again, just making corrections as I go. If I see something and I'm like, well, I need to push that, make it stronger, I just jump in and do it. Right, and I can make the argument like the nostril is as dark as the eye, but I don't want attention there the way I do here. So I'm just going to leave it alone. There's enough of a hint there. I leave it just the way it is. The mouth, I can definitely get a little bit more going on in here. Help define the space between the lips.
Question.
Yes.
When it comes to glazing, I've noticed that Kevin paints by sharpening the edges and then softens the softer parts, he said, of the lashes. So I'm not sure if he's talking about lashes as like a brush term or the actual
The lashes here. And then, read that again?
Yeah, so he's just noticing that you're kind of laying in a sharp edge and then fading out.
Yeah, there's no choice. The brush puts down a sharp mark. Right, the glazes, because they're liquid, they go down razor sharp, and then I have to go in and intentionally knock the edges down. It would be nice if I had a brush that put them in with soft edges, but that doesn't work like that. Every edge goes down sharp when you're dealing with a paint that's so fluid.
And so the question that came along with that is, what are some things to pay attention to without overdoing it, without overdoing those edges?
Well, so there's really nothing like that. This is one of those places where experience is everything. You have to play with it. You have to get in and do it. You'll put down paint and it'll be razor sharp, and then what do? You need a brush to take the edges off. You get a brush, try one with paint, try one with no paint, see what happens. And the more you do, the more you make sense of how you get what you want. Right? And it's like you're watching me work. I want certain things. When you do your paintings, you might not want the things that I want in your work. And so you have to figure out how to make this give you what you want in your work. Right? And that's the case. That's everything in painting. Right? In education, all it does is gives you a starting point. It gives you some ground rules to figure out how to get a result. And then as you develop as an artist, you start finding better ways for you, based on who you are and how you like to work, to get the results you're looking for, right? But a lot of this is, and it really is just a matter of experience once you have a sense of how it's done, right? And so you get an education, so you have a sense of how it's done, and then you clock the hours in front of the easel, developing your experience to figure out how best you can do it. The best way for you, what fits your personality. All right, because if you go into 100 artist studios Every artist is going to paint differently. They're all going to have different ideas about how to best do this stuff. And so you have to be, you know, you go and you do that, you go and you watch other artists work. You don't want to just copy what they do or take what they say and be like, well, that's the way that it works. You want to be able to look at what they're doing and make sense of it, and then play with it a little bit and see like which parts of it are good for you, which fit your personality, and which ones don't. And the ones that do, you keep, and the ones that don't, you file them. You know, you get rid of them. You hold on to the information, because who knows, maybe down the road you may think differently. You might feel differently about how you want to paint. I'll give you, years ago, I had gone into many years ago, I'd gone into a bookstore and I was looking at art books, and I remember seeing this book. I picked it up. It was so well reviewed, and I flipped through it and I thought, oh, this guy doesn't have any idea what he's talking. Like, this stuff's awful. It didn't make any sense to me, and it just seemed like these loose, kind of lazy paintings. And I kind of scanned through it, and it just didn't seem like there was much there for me. And so put the book down and went back about my business. But I thought nothing of the book. I couldn't believe it was being so well reviewed. So I guess about 4 or 5 years later, I'm in the bookstore and I pick up this book and I open it up, and it's one page after another of pure genius. I mean, the guy who wrote this book is like, he's an absolute genius. He's a master at producing art, and he's a master at explaining how it's done. And I get about halfway through the book, just kind of flipping through pages, and I realize it's the book that 5 years ago I thought was written by a buffoon. And so when I say, like, you know, get rid of the stuff you don't need and hold on to the stuff you do, I don't mean completely dump it. Like, just kind of file it. Don't forget about it, but you don't have to implement everything you see, and you don't have to buy into the idea that whoever you're learning from at this moment has all the answers. Nobody has all the answers, right? Because the answers, even like I can give you how to make a painting. I can give you the technical explanation of how a painting is built. But in the end, your paintings are not going to feel like my paintings, because you're different than me. Your goals are different in your art. And so copying my style entirely pulls you away from who you are as a person, and in that, an artist. So the idea is learn, see how things work, make sense of how things work, see how artists do what they do, how they can bend the material to their will to get the effects that they get, and just kind of file that information and pick and choose the ones that you like, the ones that feel natural to you, right? And that's the thing, you want your process to feel natural. If you're constantly fighting when you're standing in front of an easel working, you're not going to be able to just be yourself, right? You got to get to a point where standing in front of an easel and working is comfortable. Like it feels like laying in bed, you know, with a glass of wine watching TV, right? You want to get to that point where it really does feel like that it's relaxing, and again, not everything's going to go you know, perfectly for you when you work, but that it shouldn't be stressful. It should be a nice relaxing thing, something when you sit down to work that you look forward to it, because it is pleasant. And it's only going to be that if you're doing what fits you. And another example with that, years ago I went and I saw my first show that I saw of Odd Nerdrum. Odd Nerdrum, if you don't know who he is, the name is spelled O-D-D. Last name is Nerdrum, N-E-R-D-R-U-M. They call him the Rembrandt of our time. His work is exquisite. Subject matter leaves a little to be desired for some people, but the technical skill that he has is incredible. It's just off the chart. And I can tell you that viewing his work online does not even begin to give you a concept of how powerful his paintings are in real life. They're stunning. And but I saw his work, and he works very heavy, lots of thick impastos, and he's got all kinds of tricks. He plays around, he manipulates the material, but in relief, in 3 dimensions. And I fell in love with what I was seeing. I was so impressed by it. And I went home and I started painting heavy because I really loved what he was doing. And it wasn't a natural fit for me. But I forced it and I forced it. And the paintings were so hard to do. I struggled with it because it really wasn't, it went against who I am. I had to get to a point where I was like, you know what? I can go and I can love the work when I see it, but not be to a point where I want to go home and replicate it. Enjoy it in somebody else, but not try to make it mine because it wasn't the right fit. And so when you're learning, know who you are, right? Feel free to, spread your wings and attempt things, try new things, but don't try to force yourself to be someone you're not when you're doing your work. And things that feel natural, you'll know what they are. You're not going to have to fight with the materials in the cases when you're doing what is natural. I'm going to put all these already. All right, I'm just kind of fumbling around here, trying to get some of these things in place. And again, the paint moves around quite a bit, and so I'm kind of messing things up and then having to put them back in, which is fine. It's just par for the course. But again, no harm. Just managing the material as I go. And I'm feeling pretty good about where this is now. I'm really kind of liking it. I am going to drop some highlights in here that I don't currently have. I just want to bring some highlights in.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
The book that you mentioned, people are wondering if it was Alla Prima by Schmidt?
Nope. No. It was David Leffel, L-E-F-F-E-L. Oil Painting Secrets of a Master. I think it's his first book. It's his first book, not the second one. Not that the second one is a problem either, but the first book, really spectacular. He just celebrated his 90th birthday, but just an incredible painter.
Got a question for you.
Yes.
Will you paint the eyelashes? I heard the pros don't paint them in their portraits, but it's very tempting sometimes.
It is tempting, and no, I will not. Do you know why? Because I'm a pro, and pros don't paint eyelashes. Yeah, no, I won't paint them because I kind of hint at the edges. I don't have the edges razor sharp, so it's not just a line. But I'm not putting all those eyelashes in. I just left the edge kind of jagged, and that'll do the job for me. I don't need to do anything else. Here, I'm just going to hint just little hits of light, which will help to explain the form a little better. I'm just going to scrub them in and blend them away. It's going to give me some nice pop, separating the nostril from the philtrum here. And again, very small amount of paint on my brush. Just enough. I got to go back and forth to make a mark. Just one pass isn't going to make a mark. I have, like I said, very, very small amount of paint on my brush. And again, this is my flesh tone. I mixed this. This is in these underpinnings. So it's not a major departure from what was already down. And in fact, it's part of the same color scheme. If I tried to just mix something in, like something light, it's not going to work. But the same color, because it was built in. And you see, I pulled all my, this is all dry paint, but underneath it's wet. And so I mixed enough paint that I could transport it here for this stage. And again, just dropping some highlights in. Being very careful not to overdo it. It's the last thing I want to do. Very, very hard to recover from this if I put too much down, because it'll overwhelm the glaze.
Two questions.
Yes.
First one is, how long do you have to wait between the glazes in drying time?
It'll be dry tomorrow.
Cool. And then second question is, are you using opaque highlights?
Yes. The only way to add additional light, brighter shades is through opaques. Yeah, and like I said, the colors that I use, the stuff that I used for the underpainting, what's down here, is all opaque. Again, I'm being very gentle and just working it into the paint, the glaze that's already down, so it mixes a little bit, right? It's already the color of what's underneath. Now I'm mixing it into whatever wet paint is down, so it feels very natural. And it's a very small amount of paint. I mean, really, really small amount of paint. And I'm literally just dusting the surface of the painting.
On the topic of opaques, if you put in opaque paint in this stage, will you be able to keep glazing afterwards?
No. Once I move to opaques, I cannot go back to glazing. Yeah, because the opaques, once you put them down, if you put a glaze into it, it'll just haze. Will not look very good. Just very, very subtly. And there's more light in here in the photograph, but I don't want to put in nearly so much. Makes her look like she's kind of sweating. So I just want to get enough that I get a feel of that light hitting in here, and it helps to give the impression of greater volume.
Kevin, I believe you got this question last week, and I've forgotten the answer. When you paint a portrait of 2 or more people, do you completely finish one face first and then do the second?
You know what? It depends on the painting. Like, every painting's different. Like, what do you do? I mean, it depends. What does your schedule look like? Do you have time? Like, your schedule affects it. Like, if painting portraits is all you do, then you probably have your cue set up nicely, and and your schedule is allows for you to tackle it however you choose. But again, like anybody doing this stuff, you can kind of decide for yourself how you prefer to work. I personally would probably move one figure to the stage where she was today, and then do the other, and then glaze it all at once, probably. But again, every painting's going to be different. It's going to depend on what I've got going on, what my schedule looks like. Really, it's funny, but like just what my schedule looks like is going to be one of the biggest determining factors as to what I do. Right, because this is production. I'm not gonna. I want to get the painting done in the shortest amount of time possible. I want to be as efficient as possible, and assembly line is always going to be faster, right? So if I've got 2 figures and the skin tones are the same, like say 2 sisters, I can mix my flesh tones, and I want to get both faces done, right? Because like I can mix the paint once. Yeah, one might be tweaked a little bit more green or a little more blue, but overall the colors are the same, and so the little shift in temperature in the skin might be handled in the glaze, not in the opaque pass. And so, but if I have 2 people who are very different, then maybe I handle it differently. Again, it's one of those things, like it's as per the painting. So there's no one answer to that question. There's just what is that particular painting that I'm working on what's the best way to handle it? And that's always the case. That's always gonna be the answer. What's the best way to handle this particular painting?
Another question. I can understand not painting the bottom eyelashes because there's a shadow, but how will you suggest the upper eyelashes?
Well, I'm just leaving them alone, leaving them exactly the way they are, not doing anything with them. There's a kind of scraggly looking edge there, and that's good enough. That does the job. I really don't need anything else, right? You know, if all you're doing is focusing on eyelashes, then yeah, you might look at this and be like, oh, you know, the artist left something out. But if you're taking the painting as a whole, the eyelashes are irrelevant. They're just one little part of a much bigger story, right? It's almost like going through a book and finding that somebody spelled the word, you know, it's without an apostrophe, and it's like, oh, the book's ruined. You know, it's one little piece of a story, right? That's what we're doing here. We're kind of telling a story, and so. Again, you're saying, like, normally I'd be rotating this painting. It's a little bit hard to get in here with some of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, like you're thinking, like, eyelashes tells me you're detail-oriented. Would you paint fingerprints on a hand? No. Why? Because it's absurd. This isn't necessary, and other than to explain that there are eyelashes there, right? You don't have to go into all of those details. They're just not necessary. You know, you'll hear skilled painters will always say big shapes first, and then you work your way to the small ones. And by the time you get to the really minute details, you realize they're completely unnecessary to explain to a viewer what you're trying to explain. You know, you look at like John Singer Sargent. There are no eyelashes in any of his paintings, but nobody cares. And it's not because they're missing, it's because they're not needed. Right? The paintings are wildly successful without. You don't want to get hung up on minute details. They stand in the way. They stand in the way of the bigger things. Like I always describe, like, so if you were painting a baseball, right? If you get the form of the ball right, so the ball feels really round and really three-dimensional, almost like you could reach into the painting and pick it up, and you don't even bother putting the stitching on, it succeeds as a ball. However, if you do a baseball and the ball doesn't have the form, it's kind of flat and wobbly looking, it doesn't feel like it holds real space, but you put the stitching on it, it still fails. Right? You might recognize that it's supposed to be a baseball, but it fails, and the extra details don't save it. However, the ball without the extra details, without the stitching, still functions as a ball. The eyelashes are the same thing. This face is not diminished for the lack of a few stray eyelashes. And I could put them in, but they actually, I would make the argument that they would make the painting a lesser painting. And if you go and you look, anybody who puts those things in, for the most part, unless they're doing hyper-realism, anyone who's doing realism and puts them in, they kind of look funny. They look out of place. They look a little bit, they just look funny. And in the photograph, like even when I look at them in the photograph, they look kind of odd. I know what they are, but they look kind of odd to me. I know they're not going to move the painting forward. And so you just, again, experience is going to be your greatest guide in this. Like, put eyelashes in. And I'll tell you, like, I know that if I go in and I kind of start pulling them up, I will be sorry. I will be sorry, because the painting will be diminished for it. And again, that's experience. Right, but I don't know really how else to explain. I'm trying to find ways to say something beyond, well, this is what my experience tells me, and if you look at all the other experienced painters, they're clearly doing the same thing, so their experience tells them the same. I don't have a I don't have a better response than that. And it's kind of a weak response. But there's a reason that you don't see professionals putting that stuff in. And what it is that pretty much across the board, there's a consensus that it doesn't help the painting, it actually hurts. And so you don't see it going into the works of professional artists because you put the labor in and you wind up with a lesser painting for it. And obviously that's not what any artist wants. Anyway, so I mean, I'm pretty much done there. I'm really liking the background the way it is. I'm liking the fact that the hair's not that dark. There's so much that I could do in here if I wanted to make it match this. I could actually paint the background opaquely, and then I can bring out this hair, right? Because this hair right now is darker than the background, but in here it's lighter, right? Same here. This is darker than the background, but here it's lighter because the background's almost black. But I'm really liking the airiness of this, and so I'm just going to leave it alone. It doesn't require anything more than it is. I may come in here and put a little bit more dark in here against her body to pull out to separate her neck and her trapezius from the background. But even that, I'm not sure. So I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to lay in a little bit of paint in here just to marry the face and the neck. And then I'll pull this down and I'll decide what I want to do with the background. But I think I'm leaving the hair the way it is. Right, I'm going to have to take a look and see how the eyes read compared to this, because they're about the same right now. The darks in the eyes and the eyelashes compared to the dark of the hair. If I make the hair darker, this relationship with the background might not look so nice. So I really need to make a decision about that. And so while I'm thinking it through, I'm just going to get this laid in here. And again, this down in here is no details. It's just kind of getting on a little bit of color that I feel might be missing. And again, I just want to make sure that it feels the same. So again, I'm missing a portion of the photograph. Again, just pulling a little bit of the red up into here, not everywhere, just down in here. Have some in here, so I just want to kind of knock it down a little. Right, I'm actually not going to do much more than this. I'm now going to just soften this. I get a little bit darker back in here, so maybe grab this purple. This is going to go maybe right here. Kind of come across.
We're getting quite a few comments about the eyelashes.
Well,
if
I'm not doing them. What about them?
Yeah, so Estelle said, I understand Kevin's answer about eyelashes, but perhaps it's a man answer because it's a multi-billions business.
On your face, not on my painting, right? I can tell you that I've painted eyelashes. They never look good. They never look natural. They never contribute in a positive way to a painting. This is not me just being like, hey, this is what I do and this is the way it's done. Well, you should know if you've been watching me. I don't do that. Like this is my experience, and not just my experience that I'm sharing with you, but literally every successful portrait painter ever basically adheres to the same rule, and there's a reason. I'm not painting them the way that I'm painting them because I haven't tried the other way. And I can guarantee you, all the other painters, Caravaggio and David, and from the beginning of time all the way to today, there's a reason they don't put them in, right? And what it is that we've played with it, and it fails over and over and over again. And so we don't do it, right? There's a reason that they don't go in, and it's just, it diminishes the painting, right? And it's that simple. Like what I'm saying is, don't take my word for it. Get your work to this level, and then put your eyelashes in. And then make sure you have a rag in hand so that you can wipe them out. I mean, because that's what you're going to do. You get a painting to this level, the last thing you're going to do is put those things in and think they're okay. And again, I'm telling you from my experience, but experiment with it. Don't take my word for it. Like, hear what I'm saying and experiment with it on your own. You don't even have to make a painting like this. Figure out how just to paint the eye, doing exactly what I showed you, just an eye, so that you don't have to spend time making this entire painting, but just an eye. And after the eye is done, glaze the eyelashes in and see how it feels. I guarantee you, you're not going to be happy with them. The eye is going to look better without them. And it doesn't mean that it's going to look, you know, like I've left them out so it looks less like the photograph. But that doesn't mean that the painting's diminished for that. The painting is not a copy of the photograph. The painting is its own thing. I promise you, like the person who gets this in the raffle will get it. I'm actually going to send the photo reference with the painting. The painting is so much nicer than the photograph. It is, Daniel's head's like, yes. It's so much more three-dimensional. It feels like skin. This doesn't even really look like skin, contrary to what you might think when you look at a photograph. This not only looks, but it feels like skin. This doesn't. And again, so I'm not simply copying what's here. I'm making decisions that make this more successful than this in portraying this girl. The eyelashes, leaving them out is a choice based on 30 years of experience and experimenting. Clearly, I mean, I experiment, I play around, I try things out. I can tell you, if you actually go back in the video, watch this one. If you go back in the video, after we're done here, and we post it and it goes up, it's up on YouTube, you go back, you'll see I started putting them in and then took them out. Did you catch that? No, you didn't.
No.
I started to put them in and I took them out because they looked terrible. Yeah. So.
Sneaky.
Yeah. Well, I thought, well, you know, maybe I could, they're not so bad. And then common sense kicked in. 30 years of experience kicked in and was like, what are you doing? You know better than that. Get that out of there. And so I did. But if you go back and watch the video again, when I'm doing that eye, I actually put some of these lashes in, sort of pulling them up, and then wipe them out, kind of push them back down with a brush. So yeah, I mean, yeah, they didn't look good. But again, my big thing is experiment. Don't take my word for it. Like, hear what I'm saying, because I'm giving you, right, you're here to get some wisdom from me. So I've given you wisdom. Don't paint eyelashes like that. Cluster them together as a big shape and keep them simple. But play with it. You are entitled to your ideas about this stuff because you may paint them and decide, you know what, that is the aesthetic I want. Don't let me stop you from that, right? Don't let what I believe or what any of the other artists who have come before me or you know, my peers, what we believe, dictate what you do. You get to decide who you are as an artist, right? All of the stuff that I'm showing you, this doesn't teach you a style. It's just giving you a language with which to create what you want to create. What I think about the eyelashes you put in your paintings is irrelevant. You have to like them. And so when you paint, you take what I'm showing you and apply it and make what you want, what you love. My opinion is really irrelevant in that, right? And it's like, all I can do is say, my experience tells me that doesn't look as good. I would steer away from it. That shouldn't stop you from trying it yourself. And if you try it and you like it, stay with it. I'm not right, I'm just opinionated where this is concerned. So.
And just to really nail the coffin here, last question I'll bring up about the eyelashes.
Yes.
Did you ever have a client be upset that their eyelashes were not there?
Nope, I've never had a client ever even notice it. Well, because again, the eyelashes are there. I'm just not putting these on hair. You know, it's like, again, like if you have somebody and they've got a haircut and they've got, like, you know, the person who cut their hair missed a few hairs and they've got, you know, a couple of long, do you put those in? No, you would take them out. You would ignore them. And it's the same thing with the upper edges of the eyelashes. Now, again, if she had really long eyelashes, if she had gone out and had these extensions and they were bold and that's different. Like, I can't leave that out. But this, they're kind of scraggly looking. They're not designed. They're just kind of sitting there. And so they don't contribute. They would be a distraction where her eyes are concerned.
I think a meme has come out of this, Kevin. It's on your face, not my painting.
What was that?
What you said, you said on my face. On your face, not my painting.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised if there's some evolved merch that comes out with it.
Yeah. And look, you know what? Like I said, I mean, all I have is opinions. They're based on my experiences, and I'm sharing them. Do with them what you will, right? Do with them what you will. Don't take them at face value. Experiment with them. You may agree with me at some point. You may disagree, and that's fine. I'm not here as a teacher, not in Evolve, not at the school, not here to create clones. I'm trying to give you information so that you can be you as an artist. And that's it, nothing more. And so everything that I say, take it with a grain of salt. I don't know everything. Well, I'm the first one to admit that. I don't know everything, but I figured out how to explain this. But you have to take it and kind of run with it and make it yours. So, and if you do a painting, if one of you does a painting and does eyelashes and they're exquisite, send them to me. Send it to Evolve. They will forward it to me. I would love to talk to you. Yeah, and I don't say that as a joke. I actually mean it. Because if you can produce that and it's really beautiful, I would want to see that. I'm a lot more interested in growing than I am in being right. You know, I want to grow as an artist every day. I don't care about being right. If somebody's got something I don't have, they're able to do something I can't do, I want to know how. I want to see how it works. So if you can do that, please share. So I have a fan brush for these bigger areas because I'm not going to be able to soften this with a small brush. The areas are just too big. And again, like I told you before, if you see something get in the paint, get it out of the paint. And so here, just going to soften this, make sure it's all even. I'm not even going to bother with other colors. I just wanted to get that red in there. I'm going to wipe out a little bit. But this is not the painting. This is. And so I'm not worried about this so much. I just want to make sure that structurally that the neck and the collarbone all work. That's really my concern. I'm not worried about the subtle blues and purples and everything else. I just want to make sure that I've got it, that it feels natural here.
Question here.
Yes.
When you paint in the tonal values, are you thinking of them just as simple, flat, two-dimensional shapes, or are you thinking of these tones as light and shade on the surface of a three-dimensional form?
Well, I'm always thinking shadow and light. That's the starting point. I'm always thinking what is shadow and what is light. And that's throughout the process. I'm not really thinking about the fact that it's a nose or a mouth or a cheek. I'm just thinking in terms of there's a light source hitting this, this is a frontal plane, we turn a corner, there's a receding plane, this is lit, this isn't, or this is brightly lit, this is subtly lit, and because there's a bend in the form, there's a gradient there. And so where does the gradient happen to give me the impression of the face turning here? And again, I say face, but to give me the turn where I want it to be. The eye is the same, the eyebrow, the forehead, the nose, they're all the same. And so that's all I'm looking at. I'm not really thinking about the face as a face. I'm really just thinking in terms of the form. So for me, when I do this, like I find that it's too hard to think of it as a face. It becomes so complicated. It's easier to just think of it as color value choices and gradient or sharp edge choices. Like each thing is managed that way. And in the end, if I make all the decisions right or the majority of them right, this portrait emerges from the decisions. I didn't try to paint her. She just emerged from 1,000 decisions that you've watched me make, one color value choice at a time, one edge at a time. And so, like, as I'm doing this, I'm always just thinking value color, right? The value colors which I talked about, that they're already established. I'm just doing a value painting because I've already chosen my color scheme. I'm doing a value painting, figuring out how dark or light something is. I put down 2 shades, one next to another, and then I just have to figure out what the edge is. That's all this is, and it's that thinking from start to finish. That it never stops. At no point do I stop and go, ooh, I've got a portrait now, and start changing what I'm doing. I just keep hammering away at the painting in the same way. Value, color, edge across the painting. And again, the painting of the girl emerges from those choices. At no point am I painting a girl. She just emerges from the choices that I'm making. And so, you know, it actually is it's a relatively simple process, and at no point do I feel like suffocated by the idea that I'm trying to bring this girl to life on a canvas, because there's no girl in a value, color, edge choice. It's just values, colors, and edges. It's just colored mud. And again, if I do them properly, if I take my time and I make each one of them, I carefully think through each one, put the paint down carefully, manage the edges nicely, the girl emerges from the choices. So. And again, like I said, I mean, I'm not looking to do much here. Just probably that's it. Good. And so I got a couple of highlights I've got to drop in.
Have you decided if you're going to put the necklace in?
I'm not going to. There's no need for it. It doesn't move the painting forward, so I don't see it as being necessary. Again, like if this were a commission piece, and the person told me the necklace was something of importance to their family, well, that's different. But you know, for what I'm doing here as a study, no, I am not concerned with that. And again, I mean, at this point, I'm just kind of trying to figure out a couple little hits here or there that kind of bring the painting to life a little bit more. So I think I'm going to glaze a little bit into the hair, tiny little bit. I want to shift it a little bit darker to kind of align with the eyes a little bit more. So I'm mixing together what I use for the eyes and then some of the purplish mixture that I used in the mouth, so that it's not, I don't want it to get too dark. And again, kind of, I'm putting it down loose. Again, it's hair. Just letting the brush strokes kind of sit in there, and even letting them kind of go out into the background a little bit so you get these little flyaways, completely see-through. which is nice because it makes them delicate. Gets a little bit more pop up in here against these highlights, just the contrast. Right, it just helps to unify the dark of the eyes a little bit with what's going on up here. Right, so the eyes don't feel completely separate from the rest of the painting. They are markedly darker. So this kind of pushes the hair more in the direction of the eyes. It's not an absolute match, but it definitely helps to marry this with what's going on in here. And again, just laying in some flyaways. I'll go down to a small brush and I'll see if I can scroll in just a little bit more. All right, so this just, I'm going to put in like almost like individual hairs in here. Right, and it's just, I don't want to go too crazy. Like I've got a lot of underpinnings behind it, so I don't have to go, it's not like I have to put in every single hair. There's lots of loose stuff in here that appears to be hair. So I just want to strengthen it. So again, a few hairs with a bunch of stuff that kind of hints that it's hair, looks like it's all hair. And so like that's really all I'm doing now. Just trying to make sure that what is down, that there's enough stuff that looks, that specifically looks like hair, that the stuff that I faked or just kind of scribbled in now feels like it feels like hair again. You know, the initial stuff that I put down is a bit of a lie. It's just some basic shapes and some movement, and it's all very thin. It's nondescript. And so now by putting in a few things that look like well-defined hair, all that stuff that's underneath starts to feel real. And again, just a few flyaways, doesn't take very much. Feels more natural. And again, the paint is very thin, the brush is barely just skimming the surface of the painting. And clearly I decided to not put a darker background in here. So I'm going to use the hair to kind of define the outer edge of the neck here, just by kind of dropping it in, like letting it run up to the edge, and then kind of go behind. And I may have to soften some of this. But I'm just kind of playing around with it. I'd probably take a soft brush and just clean up a little bit. And I mean that's basically it. Just gonna soften all this a little bit. Again, doesn't have to be sharp focus, just soft. I do want the lines to go down very sharp, but I do want to then take them down, make them feel a little bit more wispy. I had to clean up the ear a little bit. In here just. I mean, just like that. And that's pretty good. I'm going to clean up the ear just a little bit. It's kind of getting lost in there. So. I'm going back to some of my opaques. Original shade that was on the canvas when I was on the panel when I first started. Not a bad place to start. Reestablish the shape of the ear. The ear is really kind of abstract. It's not very well. It's not obvious. It's broken up and there's lots of shadows, like kind of mottled shadows. So it's a little hard to read. But I want to just solidify a few shapes. And once I do that, then the ear should feel pretty good. Go like half a step lighter. Again, just nice and easy, taking my time, just trying to make sense of everything that's here. Oh, it really is kind of screaming out for that dark edge. To explain it.
It is 9:45.
Yeah. So I'm looking at this and I'm trying to figure out does the ear work without the dark background behind it? I'm not sure if it does. I really wasn't that excited about the idea of putting in a dark background, but I'm starting to think that ear is not going to look right without it. Again, not really the way I wanted to go. I may have no choice. And so just okay. I have a feeling I don't have a choice here. And so. And so I'm defining the ear. Glasses certainly help.
Is this opaque right now?
It's one of my shadow values from the face. It is opaque. I thinned it down a little bit. basically covering over all that hair I put in. I'm gonna have to scribble it back in as a light. All right, so I'm looking for places I can marry it into the background.
A few people are wondering if you could have simply darkened the hair by the ear.
No, you know what? It's the hair is too wispy down there. I thought about it, and yeah, I mean, under some circumstances that might have worked, but I didn't see it happening, so I decided to go this way. That would definitely have made life a lot easier, but I don't think that it would have worked.
I will say this is looking a lot more solid just from this.
Yeah, I kind of like that softness though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously she really pulls away. She was connected here to the background before and separated here. She's now separated everywhere. You know, I like the idea of her being connected on one side and separated on the other, but painting had different ideas. So, painting wins. All right, so again, it's like you can see, like, you know, even in the middle of painting, easy to make a big change. Like this is a substantial change to the painting. Once I'm committed to it, I just have to figure out how to marry what I'm putting down into what's already here. Obviously, these are the colors I use for the background. I use this stuff and this stuff to make the background. So again, I saved my paint. I didn't mix a lot. This is not tons of paint, but I saved, I made enough of it, and I saved enough of it that I would be able to work into it. If I needed it, it would be here for me. And so I'm now reaping the benefits of that planning ahead. Get down to a smaller brush.
Everyone in the comments is loving this right now.
Just liking the way it looks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was funny. Someone in here, Rob Broski, is that a Art Academy student?
No.
Okay, well, yeah, so he was commenting about how you could drop in that darker shade, and we were all kind of watching you, and some people really liked the subtle effect that you had earlier, and so it's just pretty exciting right now.
Yeah, I really liked it too. I'm sorry to see it go. And I'm going to have to manage this edge, which I feel is going to be a bit of a nuisance.
Question.
Yes.
Did you remix those colors, or was it stored from the very first pass?
Stored from the first pass. I planned ahead. I mixed enough paint, and right, if you remember when I was painting, I left the big puddle of paint and I just kept pulling from the side, leaving the big blob in place. So after it dried, most of the big blob was still there, and it's skinned over, and all the paint inside stayed wet. So this stuff, these shadows, are from 2 weeks ago. Still wet inside. Not a lot of paint, but enough for me to do anything I need here. And these are only a week old. There's lots of good usable paint in there. So if I had flattened this out on my palette, then it would all be dry. But since it was a big blob, it just skinned over on the outside, and all I had to do was break it open. Again, I'm just trying to get this edge soft. The glaze in here helps to a degree. It can also make it a little bit more difficult depending on how wet the edge is. Wet paint is very hard to make soft. It tends to maintain very sharp edges. And so I don't want this to be too sharp. So if I can manage the edge, it's like this is picking up. Now I take a fan brush and I'll see if I can just dissolve that edge. Right, make sure that I'm not getting any brush strokes in there. Just kind of go back and forth over it and see if it just plays nicely. And again, this is just finessing it until it gets in line and does what it's supposed to do. All right, and so here, just soften the ear's edge. I guess that is going to have to do. And I can just try to make sure that entire edge, I'm not leaving any brush strokes like this. When I touch, I can lift paint. I want to make sure that it doesn't feel like I painted around the edge. I want it to feel like it goes behind the figure. So that looks pretty good. And now, again, I'm just going to knock the ear down a little bit. And now I've just got to draw in some hair. I don't know if this is going to work, though. This may be too wet to work into it. Okay, I've actually got to mix hair.
Question about blending those edges.
Yes.
Could you have used a bit of linseed oil there to help dissolve it?
No. Well, there's already oil in here from the glaze. And so that helps. But if this is too wet, when I put this paint next to it, wet paint tends to leave razor sharp edges. And so I have to be very gentle in blending it. Also, like in here, this is starting to tack up, and so I have to worry about lifting paint, winding up with these kind of ugly edges. Okay, so let me see what I can pull out here. All right, so there's some darker hair in here. Let's see if I can kind of pull this out to establish this. It helps to break up the ear a little bit. Now I've got to kind of dangle my hand over the painting while I work. And actually, as I'm seeing things, as I'm working, I'm kind of seeing things and I'm wanting to address them. But okay. And again, this is just finesse work. So I've got to try to figure out what color to use there. I've got to use opaques. I guess I'll be digging into this stuff. So much for the pretty set of untouched paint.
You want me to grab some other tubes?
Would you do that? Yeah, I just
Yeah.
need I need a set of color. You can grab one of the sets from over there.
Okay, one moment.
Yeah. So anyway, so I'm just gonna, Daniel's gonna run over and grab some paint for me. But basically, I need to create an opaque to match this blondish hair. I don't know what I used, right? And again, this is one of those things like I'm not dependent on like the colors that I mixed before. I don't need them. I just need to know what color I'm looking for, and then I'll be able to produce it. Or this is, I know a lot of people when they work, they're afraid if they don't mix enough color and they run out, they're afraid that they can't remix it. But if you understand how color works, it's not that difficult. Now I'm actually looking at this. I might even be able to get away with I may be able to, yeah, just leave that there for now. I may actually be able to get away with this. I'll see in a second. I know, green. A little magenta. Right, this might actually work. This is still way too light. You can see it's like way too light, but it's moving in the right direction. I don't want to get too again, just looking for, again, still way too light. I need it quite a bit darker. And so as I'm mixing these colors, and I'm thinking like brown and purple, they're going to make it less yellow. And it doesn't have to be very yellow. It just needs to be yellow relative to a lot of what's here. Right? And so this, even though it doesn't look very yellow, up in here it actually does. It actually does the job very nicely. I'm actually going to play around with this, and I'm going to see. This might actually be just fine the way it is. I won't know until I start putting some marks down. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of paint and thin it down. Right, it has to flow off the brush. Right? I have to be able to make marks that are relatively smooth, so the paint has to be fluid enough. I don't know what it's going to look like on here. I'm going to figure it out as I go. So let me kind of start here. Yeah, like this actually looks pretty good. And again, I'm still not thinking in terms of like every individual hair. I'm just trying to get the impression of movement. And I'm letting it blend in with the brown I just put down. Right, if I put a small amount of paint and I mix it a lot as I put it down, it blends and feels like it's further away. If I just let it sit on the surface, it's a little bit brighter and it pulls forward. And so basically blending, it just means kind of changing directions as I go, mixing it into the brown. And again, even a few marks up here. Don't need a lot. This is a good place to be using a maul stick rather than just dangling your hand. And again, I don't need every hair. I just need an impression of some of this. Just the fact that there's loose hair kind of flying around over here. That's all I need. Again, try not to press too hard. Trying to just skim the surface. Give me very, very fine hairs. Up in here it won't matter, but down here I want to make sure I'm getting those lighter hairs. Again, I don't need a lot of them. Just enough to connect to this, And again, like the ear, funny, it looks, now that it's defined on the outer edge, it doesn't require much. It's actually fine, probably just the way it is. All right, and so from here, I'm just going to elevate the value a little bit, make it a little bit lighter, and then I'll drop in a few highlights, and then probably stop. Right? These will be a little bit more controlled. Basically stop right there.
What kind of brush are you using?
I am using a #1 round. It's a brush comes to a point. Just drop that in there. I think I'm going to stop. I want to put that earring in. I'm going to do the earring the same as the hair. Here, let me get lighter. And again, I'm just repurposing this stuff I have. Repurposing the colors I already have mixed. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to stop right there. I think I'm just going to sign this. Before I do, I'm just making sure I've got everything that I want in place.
Nicholas Probst said that right now it's like diffusing a bomb. We're all on edge.
The real work is done. I mean, I'm basically just done. This is the easy part. Or is that a reference to the drawing the winner for the painting?
Oh no, just appreciating the work right now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's basically done. Again, just making sure anything that needs to be in place here is in place. I mean, I'm pretty good there. Let me just knock this down a little. Okay. yeah, I think that's it. So I'm gonna pull this tape. Get some nice clean edges. Yeah. I'm amazed how this stuff creeps underneath the tape. That's basically it. And again, I'm just like I see stuff like in the paint. Just want to make sure everything is clean. Okay. Painting's done. So again, it's not a copy of the photograph, and it is very important to say. Not a copy of the photograph, but I'm trying to represent as faithfully as possible what's here, capturing her character, but not the specific details. The specific details are really not that important when you start looking at the character of the subject. And again, like I'm kind of seeing something here that's bothering me. So just one little thing to help to bend that eye, get that tear duct in place. I'm just going to pull back from it just a little bit. One more mark, and then I think I'm done. Just a little bit more pop on that nostril. That's all. Gives me a little bit more dimension. Now I'm done, officially done. Okay, now comes the fun part. Who gets the painting?
Oh yeah.
Linda Smith. Congratulations. I hope you enjoy it. I'm just going to pull a couple of other names out because I want to make sure everybody sees the names are all random. Everybody's accounted for in here. Jim White, Sandra Cowart, right? So I just want to show Kristen Ayala. So they are all the names are in there. I just wanted to make sure everybody can see that at least randomly you can see they were pulled out. So, yep, so.
Awesome.
Linda Smith, congratulations.
Congrats.
I would ask that you do me a favor, when you get the painting, take a photograph with it and post it for us, right? We could drop it with the YouTube video, right? Can we do that?
Not this YouTube video, but we could post it on our social media channels and things like that.
Get it sent to Daniel.
Yeah.
Okay, send it to Daniel. Get a picture with the painting, send it to Daniel, okay? Congratulations. And again, I want to thank everybody who came out and spent time. We are going to be doing, so we're actually going to be redoing this painting, but we're going to do it in grayscale. We're going to take a couple of weeks off, and we're going to come back, and I'm actually going to show you every single step along the way. We're going to eliminate color because the color can confuse. Once you understand how it's done in grayscale, creating a scale of color is really easy. I'm going to show you how to do that, but I'm not actually going to do it in the painting process. But I want to show you how this painting was constructed from the ground up. We decided to do the finished painting first to show you what was possible. Now that you see how far this technique, and again, what are we talking, like 10 hours maybe, something like that?
Yeah.
About 10, 11 hours. If you take away all the talking, maybe 8 hours.
Probably less.
Maybe 7 hours, right? If you get an idea of what can be done with this, now we're going to go back and we're going to deconstruct the process. We're going to do it in grayscale, and I'm going to try to teach you how to actually do this yourself without any other assistance, right? Just this technique by itself makes sense of it for you. But we're going to take a couple of weeks off. I'm not sure exactly when we're going to do it. I think of 2 weeks from now. Not 2 weeks. 3 Thursdays from today, I think. Something like that.
Yeah, we'll announce it.
We'll be announcing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you enjoyed this and you want to make sense of this and you want to be able to take this and kind of make it your own, I'm going to break this down for you to the best of my ability, starting with the transfer and everything else. I'm going to try to make sense of as much of it as possible and even show you the earlier stages, how I got to the original transfer and the color, the shades that I picked. I'm going to go through all of that with you on the other side of our break. Do we have any questions before I go?
Yes, we do.
Oh, we got a few questions. I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, we were all just so enthralled by the magic that I stopped sending questions your way for a while.
What have we got?
Yeah, so first question in the queue is from Jim Thomas. He said, I'm in block 6 and I'm going to do this one for assignment 15.
Okay.
Should I retone the gray canvas the way you did 2 weeks ago, or just transfer and paint on the gray canvas as is?
So what I would say is this. Within block 6, the technique is a little bit different. This one I know is later in the block. If you want to do that, you can do that. Just make sure, go back through the videos and make sure you understand how I selected what went where, right? What the tone that was down, make sure that you know why I selected it. I do explain it in the video, and if you're in block 6, you should be able to make sense of it. But basically, it's the color and value of the buffer between the shadow and the light. That's going to be the tone of the canvas or the panel, and then you work your shadows to that shade, and then work your lights back to that shade, and that should do the job, and then you glaze. But Jim, you know where to reach me. I've actually spoken with you before. So if you need help with it, just reach out.
Awesome. Next question is from Tina. Not including these live sessions, do you have set hours at the canvas and take breaks to have fresh eyes?
Yeah, when I work, I'm constantly taking breaks away from the painting. So when you see these live streams, like I did the Grandmaster portrait, I did this one, they look like these long sittings, and I do that. But normally when I paint, if I paint for 5 hours, I'm really painting for 3 hours. I'm hanging out a little bit. It's very relaxed. Now, mind you, when I'm, so when you watch like the Grandmaster portrait or even this one, like half of my time, I'm barely working, I'm just talking. Well, I do that when I work on my paintings also. But it's like Daniel will be in the studio and I'll just be hanging out with him. I mean, 23 shots of espresso later, the hands are shaking, but I'm productive. But no, I mean, I'll sit around here and I'll interact with people that are here in the studio. I'll be on the phone, I'll be drinking coffee, I'll be sitting back 10 feet away from the painting with my feet up, just trying to make sense of what the next thing that I want to do is. I don't put in 5 hours nonstop back and forth brush to canvas. I don't work like that. When I was younger, I did, but I find that I'm less productive that way. Nowadays, I do a lot less painting and a lot more thinking, right? So I think a lot so that the marks that I make are really impactful. When I was younger and I didn't know as much, I pushed the paint around a lot because I didn't know how to organize my thoughts. Now that I know how to think, when I paint, all the work is done here. I walk up to the canvas and it's boom, 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 a few marks, and I can put my brush down and walk away. I could literally do 8 or 10 or 12 marks and put the brush down and walk away and spend 5 minutes away from the canvas figuring out what the next half a dozen marks are going to be. And the paintings move quickly like that. Again, I could spend 10 minutes painting like 1 minute thinking and 9 minutes painting, or I can spend 9 minutes thinking and 1 minute painting. The 9 minutes for me now yields a 1 minute that's more valuable than the 9 of me pushing the paint around just a few years ago. And so if you understand what you're doing, the thinking is more valuable time-wise than the painting. It yields greater results, and it makes the process simpler for you. If you know what you intend, it's easier to get it. That's all.
That's awesome.
What else have we got?
Yeah. Question. We received an oil painting from my husband's dad. Unfortunately, his mom smoked a lot, and the painting is yellowed. Is
Yes.
there any way at all to clean this?
Yes, there is. You could actually look it up online, but basically it should be varnished, and if it's varnished, the varnish can be removed. If you go and you look up videos on how to restore or how to remove varnish from a painting, you'll see how it's done. You can actually get a pretty good breakdown of how it's done. It's slow work. It's done with like Q-tips, and it's not, you can't be aggressive with it or using things that are abrasive, but you clean a little bit at a time. But if the painting is that important, you can find resources online that'll tell you exactly how to clean the varnish off the painting. Once the varnish is off, you just revarnish it. And I would recommend using, Krylon makes a varnish called Kamar, K-A-M-A-R, not to be confused with Damar with a D. It's a spray varnish. You just spray it on, just a mist, and that will be a clear coat that'll protect the painting for the duration of your life at least.
Great. And I just have to mention Linda's comments here. She said, "Oh my gosh, that's the reason I joined Evolve, this painting of Carly."
Really? Wow, look at that. You're gonna be blown away when this thing arrives, because trust me when I tell you, this camera, this is not showing you what the painting looks like.
Yeah.
You're gonna be very happy. Like I said, make sure that you take a picture and get it to us.
Yeah. She said that she'll do that. She's absolutely amazed, and she can't type, and she said she was shaking so much, and she'll pay for the insurance to deliver it to Melbourne, Australia.
Oh, okay. Don't worry about that. I'll take care of all of that. I'll take care of all of that. So.
Awesome. Just scanning through the comments here to see.
Couldn't be a
more.
New Jersey delivery, could it? Okay. What else have we got?
Yeah. Give me 1 second here.
Oh, and while we're at it, Linda, do me a favor. Send an email to Evolve. Have them put you in touch with me. Just tell them you won the portrait. They'll give you my contact information, and then we can start talking between us to get this thing sent to you.
Okay. Question from Mary Jo. Was this done on gesso board or canvas?
So this is actually, Ampersand is the company that makes it, and it's called a gesso board. It's G-E-S-S-O-B-O-R-D. So it's a masonite panel, and they're panels. Even though they're masonite, that's not what you would buy in a lumber yard. These are pH balanced, they're acid free, they're archival, and then they have, it's kind of like gesso, I'm not sure, but it's got a nice tooth on it. It takes getting used to. If you're used to working on canvas, it can be a little slippery. But it's really a nice surface to work on. It bounces a lot of light, much more than canvas does.
Awesome. That's it.
Good. Okay. Well, that was a painless evening.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin, for your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to being back to work on this grayscale version of this. And along the way, I imagine, again, not guaranteeing anything, but along the way, if the mood hits me, I will be raffling these off. Not everyone, but I'll pick and choose as we go. Okay?
Awesome.
Anyway, again, thank you. Like I said last time, I know that you could spend your time doing a million other things. I appreciate that you came and you spent the time with me. I hope that this was instructional and that it's given you a bunch of ideas about how you can move your own work forward. Whether you're in Evolve or not, it doesn't really matter to me. I do this to share with everybody. And so when we come back and we jump into the next iteration of this, I'm hoping to be able to answer a lot of questions that might have been generated and things that I kind of fluffed over while I was working on this painting. I want to be able to really make sense of it for you, and so I'm looking forward to the next iteration of this. Anyway, everybody, have a wonderful evening, and